Friday the 13th video game is a case study on how to not develop and release a video game. As a game that takes influence from the films, it puts you into the shoes of a Crystal Lake counselor trying to avoid being killed and escape, or into the shoes of Jason himself, choosing to play as an iteration from several of the films and going around and killing as many counselors as possible. Developed by a small development team called Ilphonic, you get the sense from the get-go that this is a game made by people who are huge fans of the movies, and in a lot of ways it's like their memento to the franchise. On paper it sounds like a lot of fun, and truthfully it often kind of is, but this game has just been plagued by one of the worst launches I think we've ever seen since No Man's Sky, which ultimately has ensured it will never ever get the kind of audience and fan base it might have had were it not such a train wreck. Outside of the fact that the game simply didn't connect to matches at all, there were also bugs that prevented you from gaining XP. The Kickstarter backer bonus in the form of an exclusive Jason skin simply didn't unlock for certain people. And on top of everything else, it had the kind of glitches you'd see in an early access game, not a full release. I've also not seen a community turn on a game so quickly either. I mean, the amount of people angry at the developers is understandable, but the way certain people were acting on some of the Steam forums was just childish. But my main issue with the whole thing has come from watching certain other reviewers talk about it on YouTube, not naming names, who've made it blatantly obvious that they haven't even spent all that much time with it, before pumping out a half-assed video. Considering the game was quite literally unplayable for a couple of days there, I fail to see how these people could have spent enough time with the whole thing to justify their viewpoint, positive or negative as the case may have been. So let's talk about it, because underneath the horrible launch and the current issues with the balancing and the gameplay, I think is still one of the best bad games I've played in a while. So as we just ascertained, the whole point of the game is about escaping from Camp Crystal Lake as one of the several playable counselors, or hunting down the counselors as Jason and killing them. Let's face it though, you're going to be playing as the counselors most of the time. In fact, in the 10 plus hours I've spent with the game, I only got to play as Jason twice. Right off the bat, the issue with the game for some people is going to be that you're playing as a character that in essence is supposed to die. I mean, I don't know how familiar people are with the films, but in pretty much every movie, every single character, excluding the main heroine, gets killed. And they've tried to carry this across into the game, meaning that the likelihood is going to be that most players are simply going to end the match in a horribly gruesome fashion. Now this is true kind of, though if you learn the ropes you can greatly improve your chances of survival, or at least lengthen the amount of time until you are killed. Now there's 10 counselors all up and each have different statistics which affect the gameplay. There's Jenny, who's based off the final girl trope, there's the jock type characters Brandon and Adam, there's the nerdy ones with glasses, Tiffany and Eric, and then there's the preppy type Chad that gets scared easily, as well as a couple others. A cool addition is the inclusion of Tommy Jarvis, luckily taking the form of his appearance in Part 7 and not Corey Feldman in Part 4. And Tommy can be called in with a radio and offers up the only means to actually defeat Jason. Like all the other counselors too, his abilities are limited to his stats. So for starters, each character has strength which affects how hard you hit with melee weapons, allowing some counselors to almost go toe-to-toe with Jason, or at least stun him. Then there's speed and stamina which play into your movement, with high speed and stamina allowing you to jog and sprint for longer, and repair relating to your character's ability to repair the phone, power boxes, and one of the 2 cars available to escape with. The most important, however, I think is stealth, and this is what I think most players have overlooked. Regardless of which version of Jason someone is playing as, he's always going to have this kind of sensibility where certain cabins will light up, showing if a counselor's inside, or he can just outright see someone's outline if they're outside and within range. Stealth plays such a huge part in this and can mean the difference between getting killed within 2 minutes of a match or evading Jason for an entire match because you're clever enough to not make a whole racket and draw his attention. And a lot of the complaints I've read online about the stealth in this game, or the lack thereof, I think comes from people who simply run around like idiots, sprinting all the time and leaving themselves with no stamina to avoid Jason when he actually starts coming after them. Or idiotically hanging around in groups with other counselors, which is about as subtle as having a neon sign above their heads. The issue here is that if you're playing against someone who is half decent at Jason and not a complete idiot, regardless of how stealthy or clever you are, the chances are you're gonna get killed. But what's become the problem here, I think, is that most people who don't know how to play the counselors all that well are let down by a combination of their own undeveloped understanding of the character they're playing as well as the competency of someone controlling Jason, and blaming the entire game for it. I've had countless matches where I've escaped without even seeing Jason once, but I've also had matches where I've died within minutes. Playing as Jason, on the other hand, is an entirely different kettle of fish, and you're given some arguably overpowered abilities to kill the other players with. For starters, Jason can throw knives, he can place traps down, and he can use that sensibility which, as I said, highlights the cabins or outright locations of other players. Jason is unable to use doors, but he can break them down with a few hits and also smash windows so that players will get injured when they try to escape. As Jason, you can teleport to anywhere on the map instantly, and certain Jasons have a shift ability that lets them move around at a high speed, of which you can come right out of and just grab someone. Not to mention, each Jason has its own individual executions depending on the weapon they're all using, outside of the dozen or so kills that can be used across each iteration. Like grabbing a counselor and simply choking the life out of them, gouging their eyes out, or throwing them through a goddamn window. And when you're playing as Jason, these moments are hilarious and satisfying, especially after you've finally captured that pesky asshole who's managed to evade you for so long. It's just obviously not as fun from the flip side. I think as a means to facilitate to people less skilled with Jason, if you take too long to kill everyone, you end up getting this sort of rage mode, which allows you to simply break through locked doors and walls with the press of a button, and your abilities are also on a faster cooldown. Much like playing as a counselor, playing as Jason depends on the people you're playing against and also your latency, with obviously a high ping making it trickier to play effectively. And this hit and miss aspect of the gameplay can make the game feel inconsistent at times. One thing I've found consistent across each match though is the overall atmosphere. This game does an incredible job of making you feel like you're actually inside a horror film. From the dynamic music that changes to reflect whether or not Jason is nearby, through to the visuals with that eerie moonlit backdrop of Crystal Lake. When you're running around as one of the last surviving counselors, coming across the dead bodies of your former friends, it's got this real cinematic feeling, and these are the kind of moments that make the game so much fun when they actually occur.
Please wait! Go, 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 go! Go, 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 go!
The various Jasons you're able to play as look amazingly accurate to the films they're based off, from Part 2 Jason with the white bag over his head through to Part 7 Jason with his protruding ribcage and chains around his neck from being drowned by Tommy Jarvis. Now, I don't want to make it out like this game is some kind of underappreciated gem. I mean, let's not mince words here. The game has a whole lot of problems, like huge, massive, gaping holes that really affect the gameplay in a negative way. Driving the car, for instance, is an absolute clusterfuck. Cars are either 2 or 4 seaters, and what usually happens here is you have all nearby players acting like dicks and trying to force themselves into a car to escape, often leaving behind the person who actually repaired it in the first place. When you're actually driving the car, a capable Jason player can simply teleport in front of the car to make it stop dead in its tracks, at which point the car is foobar. I know Jason is tough, but look, if he gets hit by a car, I still think he should be knocked on his ass. The car coming to a complete stop instantly is just stupid. You could also kind of argue that the inclusion of Tommy is kinda pointless. The whole reason he's been added in is as a means to actually kill Jason, though to do this is a very specific process, requiring a female counselor to find Jason's shack and equip his mother's sweater. But even then, after all that, it's a really tough requirement to actually defeat him, and it's hardly going to be completed unless it's been extremely coordinated. One thing I also think is a minor issue is ghosting, which you'd kind of expect, I guess, if people are playing together, you know, when their mate is playing as Jason and they're one of the counselors. It's kind of easy for them to tell their friend where the surviving players are hiding. Speaking of hiding too, it's not uncommon to see players simply hiding on the edge of a map with a high stealth character and waiting the clock out, which doesn't make for enjoyable spectating or gameplay in general. But I think the biggest blunder is the price. It's just way too high. It's honestly twice what it should be. $40 for a game like this is just a joke, considering you're doing the same thing for every single match and there's only 3 maps in total. How each game plays out is that wherever you spawn, you often check out the nearest cabin for a weapon, for a first aid spray, a penknife, etc., and then try to find a way to escape by searching for the car parts or a phone to call the cops. It's dynamic in the sense that the manner in which you accomplish this, if you do at all, is going to change from match to match, but the tasks themselves are always the exact same. The layout is different thanks to procedural generation, but the mechanics are never going to differ. More of a subjective thing though is just how vastly the game's going to differ for each person playing it. You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. I was playing with a friend last night as an example, and we had this match where we'd called the cops and Jason was after us, so we hunkered down in a house. After he smashed the front door down, we had to run and we got separated before meeting up in the barn nearby, but Jason again showed up and started chasing us. At this point, we got him caught in a bear trap and we ran for the police who were up at the main road. So we take off, we're running in that direction with Jason on our ass the entire time, and as we get to the bridge, we were both out of stamina and about to die, before someone controlling Tommy miraculously showed up and was able to shoot Jason with a shotgun, allowing all 3 of us to escape. And it's moments like this, these moments right here, that make this game so much goddamn fun. For all the issues with the connections, the balancing, and the discussions over whether or not Jason is overpowered, spoiler, he is, it's the little moments like that which I think make it all worthwhile. Friday the 13th isn't arguably a broken game, it is a broken game. People have compared it to Dead by Daylight, unfairly I might add. I mean, that's like holding every platforming game ever made to the same standard as Super Mario Bros. And whilst I haven't played Dead by Daylight, so I can't comment, I can say that Friday the 13th does have more than its fair share of problems. I can't see people really playing it all that long in its current state, and the progression system's also kinda slow. You unlock either a new counselor or a new Jason every few levels, but after about level 18, every unlock is just cosmetic with different clothing colours for the counselors. I think they either need to add in more Jasons to play as to balance this out, or just add in more content in general, or else this thing is going to die even quicker. But those moments when you do play it and everything works the way it's supposed to and you start to feel like this hopeless teenager caught in the middle of this murdering spree, well, there's genuinely nothing else quite like it. So look, I wouldn't recommend it right now, but I would suggest you keep your eye on it. There's planned single player content in the next few months, and in that time hopefully the developers wise up and drop the price tag down to something more reasonable. I also hope they add in a few more maps and balance the gameplay out somewhat, because there is a fun game, it's just hidden under all this mess.
Yeah! This Jason is sucks.
Jason, yeah, you suck.
Mommy has a reward.
The Jason is sucks.
Come home, sweetie.